You know what's wild? Right now, as you're watching this video, the two most powerful nations on Earth are locked in what experts call the defining rivalry of the 21st century. But here's what'll blow your mind. These same two countries were once best friends. I'm talking ride-or-die allies. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Without China, America might not even exist as we know it today. So what happened? How did we go from brothers in arms to staring each other down across the Pacific? Stick around, because this story has more plot twists than your favorite Netflix series. And trust me, you need to hear this. What's up, everyone? And welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because we dive deep into the stories that actually matter, the ones that shape our world today. And before we get into this absolute roller coaster of a historical journey, let me just say, this isn't about picking sides. This is about understanding how we got here, because knowing the past is the only way to make sense of the present. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's talk about one of the most dramatic relationship breakdowns in world history. Let's rewind the clock, way back. We're talking late 1700s. America has just declared independence from Britain, and honestly, things aren't looking great. The Revolutionary War is in full swing, and the colonists are getting absolutely pummeled. The British have the most powerful military on the planet, and here's little America with farmers holding muskets. The odds? Not good. But here's where China enters the picture, and it's not in the way you might think. While China wasn't sending troops or weapons, they were doing something equally crucial. They were trading with America when almost nobody else would. Think about it. Britain had basically told the rest of Europe to embargo these rebellious colonists. But Chinese merchants? They didn't care about British politics. They saw an opportunity for trade, and they took it. American ships were sailing all the way to Canton, which is now Guangzhou, and this trade was absolutely vital. We're talking tea, silk, porcelain, all flowing into America, and American goods, especially ginseng, cotton, and silver, flowing to China. This wasn't just about fancy teacups, though. This trade gave America the economic lifeline it desperately needed. It provided revenue, it established American credibility on the world stage, and it showed that America could survive independently. Fast forward a few decades, and the friendship deepens. Throughout the 1800s, when European powers were literally carving up China like a Thanksgiving turkey, forcing unequal treaties and creating colonial spheres of influence, America took a different approach. Sure, America wasn't perfect, but compared to Britain, France, and others who were militarily dominating China, American policy was relatively hands-off. The open-door policy of 1899 basically said, hey, let's not completely colonize China. Let's keep it open for everyone to trade. Now, was this pure altruism? Absolutely not. America wanted access to Chinese markets too. But the point is, Chinese people generally saw Americans more favorably than they saw European colonizers. American missionaries built schools and hospitals across China. Chinese students came to study in American universities. There was genuine cultural exchange happening. Then came World War II, and this is where the alliance really solidified. Japan invaded China in 1937, and it was brutal. We're talking about atrocities that still haunt history books today. And who stood with China? America. The United States provided military aid, supplies, and eventually, after Pearl Harbor, became a full ally fighting against Japan. Chinese and American soldiers fought side by side. American pilots, the famous Flying Tigers, defended Chinese cities from Japanese bombers. This wasn't just diplomacy. This was blood and sacrifice on the same battlefield. When the war ended in 1945, China and America were genuine allies with mutual respect. Chiang Kai-shek's Republic of China was one of the founding members of the United Nations Security Council. With full American support, everything seemed set for a beautiful friendship to continue into the modern era. But then 1949 happened, and everything changed. The Chinese Civil War, which had been brewing since the 1920s, finally concluded with the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, defeating the nationalists. Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan, and on October 1st, 1949, Mao stood in Tiananmen Square and declared the People's Republic of China. Suddenly, America's friend was gone, replaced by a communist government that aligned itself with the Soviet Union. The Cold War was in full effect, and now China was on the other side. The friendship didn't just cool, it froze. Within a year, Chinese and American soldiers were killing each other in Korea. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 saw massive Chinese forces pushing back American troops, leading to a brutal stalemate that still defines the Korean Peninsula today. The two countries went from allies to enemies in the blink of an eye. For the next 2 decades, America and China had virtually no relationship. There was no trade, no diplomacy, no communication. China was behind the bamboo curtain, and America was the capitalist enemy. It seemed like the friendship was dead and buried forever. But history loves a comeback story. Enter Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger in the early 1970s. These guys realized something crucial. China and the Soviet Union were actually rivals themselves. The Communist alliance was fracturing. So why not use that? In one of the most shocking diplomatic moves of the century, Nixon visited China in 1972. The images of him shaking hands with Mao Zedong absolutely stunned the world. This wasn't friendship exactly, but it was pragmatic cooperation. Both countries needed each other to counter the Soviet Union. And you know what? It worked. Relations normalized. Trade resumed. Chinese students came back to American universities. American businesses started eyeing the massive Chinese market. The real transformation came in 1979 when Deng Xiaoping took control in China and launched economic reforms. He opened China to foreign investment and market economics while maintaining Communist Party control. American companies rushed in. This was the gold rush of the modern era. Cheap Chinese labor, massive manufacturing capacity, and an enormous market for American goods. It was a match made in economic heaven. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the relationship flourished. Sure, there were bumps. The Tiananmen Square protests in 1989 created serious tension. But overall, American and Chinese economies became increasingly intertwined. When China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, it seemed like full integration was inevitable. American consumers got cheap goods, Chinese workers got jobs, and both economies boomed. Everybody wins, right? Well, not exactly. Because while all this economic cooperation was happening, the fundamental differences never went away. China remained an authoritarian, one-party state. America remained a democracy that valued free speech and human rights. And as China got richer and more powerful, those differences started mattering more. Here's where things get really interesting. China's economy exploded. We're talking about the fastest sustained economic growth in human history. In just 30 years, hundreds of millions of Chinese people were lifted out of poverty. China became the world's factory, the world's largest exporter, and eventually the world's second largest economy. And with economic power came military power, technological advancement, and global ambition. American policymakers started getting nervous. The assumption had always been that as China got richer, it would become more democratic, more Western. That didn't happen. Instead, China developed its own model, what they call socialism with Chinese characteristics, and started exporting that influence globally through initiatives like the Belt and Road, massive infrastructure investments across Asia, Africa, and beyond. Suddenly, America wasn't looking at a trading partner anymore. They were looking at a rival, a country that could challenge American dominance in technology, military power, and global influence. The trade relationship that had seemed so beneficial started looking like a strategic mistake. American manufacturing jobs had disappeared. The trade deficit was massive. China was using American technology and investment to build its own capabilities, sometimes through methods that Americans considered unfair or even theft. The shift accelerated dramatically in recent years. Trade wars erupted. Tariffs flew back and forth. Technology became a battlefield, with Chinese companies like Huawei banned from American networks over security concerns. The South China Sea turned into a military flashpoint. Taiwan became a potential trigger for conflict. Human rights issues in Xinjiang and Hong Kong created moral outrage. The COVID pandemic, originating in Wuhan, poisoned relations further with accusations and blame flying in all directions. And here we are today. Two countries with economies so intertwined they can't fully separate, yet viewing each other as strategic competitors, maybe even eventual adversaries. American politicians from both parties agree on almost nothing, except that China is a challenge that needs to be confronted. China sees American containment efforts as attempts to prevent their rightful rise to great power status. The irony is almost painful. These two nations that helped each other survive and thrive, that fought together against fascism, that built one of history's most productive economic partnerships, are now locked in what many experts call a new Cold War. Except this time, it's more complicated because unlike America and the Soviet Union, the US and China are deeply economically connected. They're rivals who need each other, which makes the whole situation incredibly unstable and unpredictable. So what's the takeaway from all this? History isn't a straight line. Relationships between nations aren't permanent. The friend of today can become the rival of tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, vice versa. What happens next between America and China will shape the rest of our lives. It'll determine everything from the prices we pay for goods to whether we see peace or conflict in the Pacific. The question isn't whether these two giants will compete. They will. The question is whether they can compete without catastrophe, whether they can manage their differences without military conflict, and whether the rest of the world can navigate between these two poles of power. If this video got you thinking, do me a favor and smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me what you think. Can America and China find a way to coexist peacefully, or is conflict inevitable? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your perspectives. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're going to keep exploring the stories that matter, the history that explains our present, and the forces shaping our future. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this with someone who needs to understand this crucial relationship. And remember, understanding history doesn't mean we're stuck repeating it. We can learn, we can adapt, and we can build something better. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.